sketches will do it. Personally, I need a couple of drawings to look at, say, yes, I like how this traffic flows with this building, the way it lays out. I don't like how this one looks. And then go back to the architects and say, all right, we're gonna move forward with this sketch of this drawing because it fits our community better.
But what you're just describing is more like a floor plan or a site plan and not a rendering. A rendering
Exactly.
is kind of what the outside of the building would look like,
Yep.
That's perspective. And you wouldn't normally get an idea of traffic flow or the layout of spaces by looking at the rendering. You're going to get an impression about whether it's 1-story, 2-story, what level of finishes, are around the building. If it has too many windows or not. I heard last time there was an issue about they didn't want an architect that put too many windows on the building, and not quite sure where that came from, but if that. So anyway.
So maybe we need kind of a sketch with some type of overview diagram of traffic flow.
Well, I think that's two
one of your
different things.
questions. There was a concern of this committee's was site plan, where it was going to lay, what the traffic pattern is going to be, the flow.
Really, that
So that's a site
document could answer several of these questions, like this is the location on the Valley View site, what the building looks like, what the egress and ingress. I mean, more than just 3 items, rather an integrated sketch, if you will.
But not a rendering. Yeah.
One of the questions that I was asked was about the third avenue that's going to go through the Finney.
We're gonna get to, hopefully we'll get to that tonight.
Okay. Yeah, it just kind of ties into that traffic.
Joanne, since you're the expert here at this table, why don't you unravel, why don't you answer these questions like you do, I don't know, like you do in your profession. Where at the university, we would see things, have some input, and changes would be made. So what's the path we take here?
I believe it's putting the cart before the horse to do renderings of a building that you haven't designed yet, and I've mentioned that previously. I do understand that people are concerned about the look of the building, and what I've heard, and I'm soliciting additional input here, is people don't want flat roofs because they leak, they don't want wasted space, they don't want it to seem too extravagant. I'm not sure what else. I think if we are going to do a rendering of what the building looks like, it needs to address those major red flags that the community has put forth about how the building would look. I think the site plan is important, and maybe the rough floor plans, but that all takes work. I also suggested maybe instead of doing a sketch, you gather photographs of similar projects throughout the state that meet these, flow-throughs, not too extravagant, but meet those, and just show images saying it might look something like this. And then you're not paying someone $27,000 to invent a design that's not going to turn out to be what it really is. We don't normally do renderings at that point where I work. But sometimes in private institutions, when you're doing fundraising for a project, then they may do renderings early just to get donors to donate money. We work a little different at the university where we get the legislators to donate. Usually we do a whole pre-design process with floor plans before you do the renderings. So, and I guess there's different ways to approach it.
It seems like to me you have to have an order. And it would seem to me, first you need to know, can you buy those 2 properties on Penning Road? Then you know if it's 1 story or 2. And unless you do that, then you're spending a lot more money and effort trying to design 2-story or 1 story. How much time will it take to get answers from the property owners? Any idea?
We do know that's the second question. We do know that Eric Cross has approached the property owners before. We do know that one of them is interested in having his property purchased. The other one is not as interested. Since one of the questions was, since the question was plans for additional acquisition, and that would be essentially the location we would try to acquire. I did ask Eric to go ahead and approach the property owners to see if they'd be willing to have their properties appraised and kind of start moving that forward. So, yeah, I'll move on to question 3. The specific location. What I've heard from this committee is that, and what you've heard from the community, is that you want to know the exact location that the building's going to be. And therefore, prior to or at the same time the board taking a bond resolution, we want to make sure that a big sign, new middle school will be right here. We want to make sure everybody knows where that's going to be. I heard that loud and clear.
Paul?
Yes.
And you had talked to ALCS about putting a couple of, I don't know, we call them sketches now, about site locations
Yes.
on the current property that we have and the expanded property.
Yes. And so we did that, you've saw that in some of the previous meetings. I believe when the architects were here, they kind of laid a building on top of the properties. They're going to do that, take another look at that, particularly if we were able to acquire the 2 properties on the corner.
Does the school district have a preference whether they're 1-story or 2-story? Does that get involved with the ed spec? I don't know. I mean, does it, if they can't be bought, does it matter whether it goes 2 stories, or is the preference to buy them 1 story?
I can't answer that. I believe that in the email that I received from Bill Grivich, I think the preference was 1 story, but I don't know why, if that's what it was.
I heard an architect, or one of the architects, say at one of our meetings here that it's sometimes more efficient, more cost effective to build a 2-story building. It didn't affect ed specs. I personally would like to see us go with the most efficient building that we can build.
I just didn't know if there was, from the ed spec standpoint, what's better than the
And I think from a safety standpoint, we have to look at,
Yeah.
what is the best way to secure a building, the best way to evacuate a building, those sorts of things have to all be taken into consideration. And this level of kids is different than when you have elementary kids or high school kids.
And that's one of the things that really came clear on the property, or when we were doing the ed specs for Ellensburg High School. One of the key concerns was safety, and that's why the 2 principals' offices look out onto the commons, why the 2 principals' offices can see down the hallways on both sides of the building as well as upstairs, why we have the attendance window facing the commons, why we have a big flat screen TV with all the computer images flashing on that big screen TV, because students know that they're being watched. It's why during the ed spec process, that's why the gymnasium, especially the auxiliary gymnasium, was built next to the commons, so kids, can go play basketball in there during lunch and still be monitored. A teacher can step out into a hallway, see clear up and down that hallway, and so a lot of during that ed specification process, a lot of that information went into building of the high school. And I just have to say it over and over again, the high school, the deal of the century at $28 million. You had 5 bids that came bid on that high school. All the bids came in within $2,000 of each other, and there were 13 contingencies that we were hoping to get, and all 13 contingencies were given to the district. So it was just an incredible facility, an incredible deal for the community.
Paul, since we're questions 1, 2, and 3, and you did raise the issue, John, about space. One of the things that I did hear, not from everybody, was they felt the high school, they didn't know the other part of this, I guess. I guess I did hear often that it was extravagant, that there's a lot of lost space. What does it take to heat, above the cafeteria? I must confess, I did hear that from people.
Wow factor, when you walk in those main doors, if you've ever taken tickets for a sporting event, you'll hear opposing families come walking in, wow, I mean, it truly is a wow factor, it's a pretty awesome facility.
By the way, I'm not speaking for myself,
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it too,
Yeah.
I like it too. But also that, a lot of that space, is that vaulted roof that comes off of that gym that had to be up there anyway, because, the balls being banging down on the head if you try to have a gym like Lincoln, so.
And acoustics as well. It's great for acoustics.
But anyway, so it's something that I did hear.
And I think the committee and the boards heard that. Will have to be taken into effect when they.
And of course, we all know that it's a given, it's not even worth repeating, energy efficient. And I think the experts have to tell us, we might not like it, but when it comes to our pocketbook, we will.
It's far more efficient than the previous building.
No, I mean the new school.
With 47 doors on that facility and students coming.
Yeah.
Of course, maybe a lot of you went to that school where students were changing classrooms every period through 47 doors. So we can probably get some of that information, and and I'll ask the architects to kind of work that out so that we can provide it to the committee.
I'd like to follow up on what Leo said, because that makes a lot of sense to me. The fact that really one of the first things is the property issue. Because you can't do a site plan unless you know what it looks like, and you really can't design a building, I don't think, unless you know how it's gonna be situated and where. So, an integrated plan, I think, has to start with establishing what about that property, where is the building going to be, is the crucial thing from my point of view.
Yeah, the answer might be a 3-story building. I mean, it depends on where it goes on the site.
Well, and the answer also might be it might not be available in the next 3 years, but would it be available in the next 10 years? So that it might limit you to saying, okay, we've got to build a 2-story building on this site, but we know that we can expand our property eventually.
Can the school board condemn property? Is that a viable? Or not possibility, I shouldn't say viable, is that even a possibility?
Oh, that has a bond, Fritz.
First, we could, but I don't think anybody on the board would agree with one of them. I know I wouldn't.
Just wondering.
The explanation for the difference in construction cost per square foot. I wasn't able to answer the question for Kittitas. What I am going to do in order to answer that question is I'm going to hire a construction management firm or the construction department, see if the construction department at Central could go to Kittitas High School, take a look at that project, see what's in that project, because there's all sorts of things that could change how, if it's built with sticks or if it's built with steel, if it's built with HVAC system, or if it's built with wall air conditioners. So there's all sorts of different things. And I really want to get this answered because it's been asked. Construction projects throughout the state. The handouts that I gave you aren't very good. That's why I gave the links to the construction projects. And I think the best kind of comparison is the cost per square foot. And you kind of get an idea when you look at the average cost per square foot for all of the buildings that we are, at least on the proposals we had, we were very much in the ballpark. Some of the schools I saw $310 per square foot. Some of the schools I saw come in about $170. But there's all sorts of things that impact that. And so you really have to take a look at, okay, cost per square foot. Otherwise, people end up saying, well, you know, this school district over here was able to build a building for blank million, and you're proposing this million. Well, you really have to take a look at what's going into that project. And that's why I gave the links to these two websites. I think it's important to take a look at it. And that's why I really want to get the answers for Kittitas. What type of building is it made out of? And maybe we compare it to the high school so we have some comparison. But that's how I was going to continue answering that question.
I have a question of me as a board member. How important is that comparing the Elmsford High School to the Kittitas High School? Because it's going to be like comparing homes and how homes are built and what, if you're comparing your neighbor's home to your home, is that, I have a concern that it may upset some Kittitas people or that their school isn't built. Knowing what went into the Elmsford High School, I know that project very well. I don't know the Kittitas project, and I don't want to have this report say, well, they have a building that's not built that well, because I know those board members really well, and I know what any board member has to go through to build a building, and they have to make decisions. So we're going to be putting their decisions that they made on that construction cost of that school up in front of everyone, saying, okay, well, they cut, maybe they didn't, but they might have cut corners here and here. Are we going to be willing to make those same decisions? As a board member, I'll have to be willing to make those same decisions to cut corners here and there if we have to do that. And so that's, I guess, I don't mind comparing SELA, the Ellensburg School District, where we build a middle school, with what SELA is doing, Yakima's building a high school, but other middle schools outside our valley, so to speak. So help me out here.
It's something that keeps coming up though.
Yeah, it does.
It has to be addressed.
I think the issue is a pretty logical response called sticker shock. I think when someone is confronted with $49 million for a school, and it's just so overwhelming, when they know another school, they don't even stop to think about whether it's it's a foreign car or a compact or a minivan or, it's sort of like, how much? And then, wait a minute, Kittitas High School costs, half that. How is this possible? And so I think the initial is just simple sticker shock and trying to make sense out of it. The hard part is to then present the square footage, the cost per square foot, being able to say how many students it's going to serve as opposed to that. So that the comparison is a tough one because the person is probably still reeling from the sticker shock. And so it takes a while for that to settle down before the explanation makes sense. I've had that conversation with several folks. Why does it cost that much when this one? And I've tried to say, well, it's 3 times as many students or whatever the accurate number is, and the cost, and eventually it settles down. But it just takes a while, and people, until they get an answer they want to believe that they can cope with, they're still going to be going, yeah, but it's still $49 million. I think that's where it comes from. It's just that initial sticker shock.
And Bill Druick didn't help when he said, we're not going to be like Kittitas, we're not going to use siding on our building. I mean, that to me is illustrative of why people are making that comparison, because they were able to reduce their costs by doing things that Ruby said, we'd never do that. I mean,
They're not gonna vote for it. I live north of Kittitas, and that pissed them off. That guy, he wouldn't work for me. They were really offended that he would stand up there and say that. And they weren't even at the meeting, and I don't know how, and I think all that's irrelevant, it's water under the bridge, but it goes back to what Bob said. Maybe we wanna say that, like Jeff said, this is how many students that building was built for. Kittitas, and it costs this much, and then use SELA for a cost analysis, but I know 10 or 12 guys, they wouldn't vote for that thing if it was any good. because of what that guy stood up there and said.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, that's the source of part of the angst, but I do think that you can easily get around this by having several buildings hit Kittitas in there, because people wanna know, let's focus on the basics. It's this many students, it's this square footage, it was 2006, it was the price per square foot, period. Ellensburg High School is this many students, it was this square foot, it was 2005, it was this per square foot. Sela was 2011, it was this square footage, that kind of a simple chart. Blend it in, don't focus on it, but what you're dealing with is what happens when we put our foots in our mouths, you know? It hurts for a while.
Doug and I are the only ones here that have never done that.
Thank you.
But she's right, if you have 3 or 4 schools rather than Kittitas, it's not just Kittitas.
You know, if you travel around, I visit schools, and I look at the clusters, all the way from Kennewick and just out in Madawaska. Okay, I supervise an intern out there. You see the middle school, you see the grammar school, you see the new high school. They're pretty new. I don't know how many. But get the newest ones, get their rendering. Say, hey, can we have your rendering? Do you have an aerial shot? This costs so much, this is what it is. They're all over the place. I'm sure they can let you use them, right, for comparison?
If you credit who took them, probably.
They are already in
I
the
would ask
newspaper.
permission.
Well, and somebody came to our meeting and made this exact suggestion about going out and finding plans, look at a building that you like, and then get their plans. I think we had a couple of, and I don't know how legal or appropriate or easy that is, but the idea of getting pictures of existing buildings to go into this very simple comparison thing, for us as the well as the community, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
I just feel sorry for Mr. Happen to explain it. Because that's a hard one to explain.
We can do it.
Well, it's called apples to apples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's, we can do it.
I would compare, you could, if we don't go as simple as what Sue was talking about, you could still compare some of the finishes without giving your opinion about whether it's adequate or not, you know?
Or compare them without telling where these finishes are. Okay, this is what a median finish looks like, and this is what this looks like.
Yeah, or this is a steel frame structure, and this is masonry structure, you know, that kind of thing. But I kind of agree with Sue. I think simple is better.
Number 5 is plans for family and vehicle pedestrian. You know, obviously a lot of that's going to happen once we know, kind of back to what Leo says, we need to know what pieces of property we have and how to go about arranging the schools on the property. So I think that's one that we need to continue to work on. Number 6 and 7, or number 5 and, no, I'm going to say 5 and 6. I have 2 handouts for you. One's on 3rd Street Extension, and the other one's on on-site improvements. And these were discussions that we had back in May 16th. Pass it around. And again, this is question number 5 and kind of question number 6. And these 2 handouts will help address some of that information on these questions. Number 5, we obviously will have to have a traffic study done when we met with the city. That's something that they are going to require. And we may have to provide for site improvements. Again, I'm trying to summarize these 2 documents fairly quickly, but again, the first one is, yes, we have to have a traffic study, and there may need for improvements, such as signalization, turning lanes, traffic circles, and to kind of just give this committee an idea for putting a traffic light or signalization in the documents that you have, rough order of magnitude is about $300,000. When we met with with when a number of individuals, I didn't meet with them, when they met with the city with regards to the extension of Third Street, what sort of the quick and dirty was, if a school is located south of Valley View towards Capitol, then we would not have to put the Third Street extension in. However, it was located on the other side, north of Valley View, then we would be required to put the Third Street extension in. Obviously, we would have to have much more discussion with the city, but I do wanted to provide at least these two documents for you to take a look at to see that it's something that we have investigated. Yes, sir.
They're in the city ordinance is that when you develop on your property, wherever the boundaries are, in dealing with the city for a few years, there's one thing, there's rules and there's no rules. And in their ordinance, and I bring this up for the committee to ponder, is that if you develop your property, it doesn't matter where the site is, and I'm not saying what the city says, I'm just saying what their ordinance says, that you have to do those street improvements. I've had to participate in quite a few of those over the years. And so, one of the things is that when you go forward, even if it's, what the city says is on the south side, don't preclude somebody appealing the SEPA based on the city ordinances for a budgeting purpose to come in, because there's a lot of people in my game that says the school district shouldn't be treated different than any developer with the school with the existing ordinances that have been on the books for 20-some years. And so I just throw that out for people to realize.
Mm-hmm.
When I built the high school, I mean, part of it was the swale had to be this, that's part of theirs.
Right.
The sidewalk extended as far as it did.
Right, and what I'm saying
all
is
of that was
nobody
part of it.
appealed, the ordinance was in place for Valley View, and that was an issue for a while with the city and the school.
We had to put all the streetlights
I
in.
understand, I'm talking about Third Street extension.
Right, yeah, that wasn't part of it at the time.
Correct, but that was their ordinance. Nobody appealed your SEPA to force the issue. I would like you to all ponder, because I know that there's some guys out there that are pretty haggard at the city because they don't go by their ordinances, that probably would appeal your SEPA this time based on their relationships with the city and the city not having consistency in their ordinances, because their ordinance when Valley View was set up was that Third Avenue was to be put in, and the school district got a waiver. I'm not saying good, bad, or indifference, I'm just saying that's the fact. The fact is that ordinance, that same ordinance that was in place is in place today, and there's not very happy developers that look at that exemption again is not going to be happening. And so I just throw that out. I'm not arguing, I'm just saying that's the world today, because the city has rules that they haven't, they faxed. Absolutely, and it's not punishing the school district, it's punishing the city for not living up to the ordinances that the school district should be obligated to do, no different than a developer. Well, it does if you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a site that says, why are they treated different than
Yeah,
me?
but the school district is the public. So, they're slamming it on everybody. To make a point.
I don't have the dog in the fight, I'm just saying that.
Okay,
Yeah, let's move on.
One more question for my benefit. The traffic study, how important would you as a group like to see that? Is that something that is not worried about?
No, I think it's important.
It's gotta be part of the integrated aspect of this. I mean, if we're gonna get detailed enough to have, any type of facilities plan, it's gotta have that in it.
The bus flow and the.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
I got it down as number 5 so far. vehicle and pedestrian.
I believe the city would require it anyway, but
Some
whether
things
or
don't
not
say
it's
these days.
required now before we get the funding for the project or later, it's whether or not you wanna spend that money now or
And
not.
that's what we need to research that concept sometime.
It was asked where students live. This is the, sort of the quick and dirty.
Couldn't figure that one out.
Our transportation director this summer put into his computer program where every student resided in the district. I kind of think that the university is right here in that spot. We are going to try to get a better picture of where, so that people can see it better. So it might actually expand this out so that you can have a better understanding, but this is the,
About 15 miles from, say, the university out there to Badger Pocket, or up to the Clapham, or out?
again, here's a quick and dirty on short notice. Shared use of the track. You know, our PE teachers, our administrators, community schools, they're gonna talk about use of facilities. They do that now. Obviously, they've had to talk because of the 8th grade move to the high school. Whether or not the design should be flexible. Again, Doug, I don't want to get into a couple of thousand square feet, but again, the idea is to add additional space to help relieve the fact that the building was at capacity. And that's really what my focus was in answering this question. Enumeration. It's essentially, since it has, Damon has a requirement to contribute to a high school, but it does not have a requirement to contribute to a middle school. They still provide what is called non-high funds to the Ellensburg School District. And maybe Farley, you could give me a quick and dirty understanding of.
Say, compensate us for lost maintenance and operations.
Okay.
For the students that are served.
Yeah.
Does Damon just go to 5th grade, or,
Goes to 5th grade.
so where do those students go to middle school?
They are homeschooled or they come to Morgan. Now, I do know that they're very willing to sit down with the board, and at least one board member is, who signs my wife's checks, is willing to sit down with the board and discuss this issue.
And how many students are going to Damon?
28 plus about 17,
So in the
38,
5th grade.
44 maybe.
We get about 6 kids a year. Does this mean that the people who reside in the Damon School District don't vote either?
That's correct.
And their property taxes aren't affected?
Yes.
That's key.
What's their boundary for that?
I don't know that.
It's very, it's 4, I just looking.
I mean, it seems like they could encompass a lot of properties for a very small number of students, but I don't know.
You were asked, there was a question about the available acreage. And so Farley was able to put together a pretty good scenario, just about every piece of acreage that we have. And you kind of, if you go through it, you can kind of draw your own analysis. it says, and so anyway, it says, can the school district include some shared space in its calculation? I think we obviously would do that with the middle school. We would have shared space. And this was in your packet. If you don't have a copy, I did bring extras. Yes.
The new purchased property across the street from the high school.
Yes.
Is that on here?
Yes,
Which one is it?
that's called the Klein property. It's right here, 1502. Nope, you can't see it.
Yep, it was there.
There we go.
Below the high school.
It's
4.86.
right here.
Oh, Klein purchase, okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the transportation maintenance center, that's also in that's that bus area between
Yes.
Valley View and the high school, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Have there been any discussions about whether any of those functions could be located elsewhere? At the transportation functions? Has there been any serious thought about that? I mean, my biggest concern would probably be, you know, storage, oil or gasoline storage tanks. So they're above ground then? I mean, if they were underground, that'd be a problem.
Yeah, Washington State has a big problem. So we do have to have them above that.
You do have them above ground. Okay, well then that's easier to move. But I was just curious if that.
I don't believe the board's had any of those discussions.
Okay.
And maybe if, with this group, with some site plans, with the map, that would be some very good discussion about how we can improve the site plan up there. Everything like that. That would be some really good opportunities to have some great discussion.
I would hope that when you have your transportation consultant look at that space, that would be a serious consideration, how that transportation center functions on that property, and whether or not it's appropriate for those to be there, or may function better if they were across the street or somewhere else on another property. I mean, it might be a great place for it. I'm not a
Those are great
transportation expert, but.
opportunity. This is what we want, is ideas.
Thanks.
Problem number, was a math teacher. Number 12, the intent is to keep the 60s and 90s wing. And I did, I don't know if it's in your packet or not, about the full day kindergarten.
It is.
Okay, because we know that according to the RCW that we will be offering full day kindergarten eventually. Our elementaries are at capacity. We have portables at every single elementary. When we did have full day kindergarten at Lincoln Elementary, we actually converted a locker room into a kindergarten classroom in order to have enough space. And so with the idea that with the legislation coming out to have all day kindergarten, we know that we're going to be needing space. So we have a couple of options. One is to utilize the 60s and 90s wing for our Excel program, our parent partnership program, our special ed department having a curriculum library. We also know that we could utilize this space if we need to alleviate, to have like a K1 set, and then to have second, third, fourth, and fifth at the other elementaries, which would may eliminate or at least put off the need for another elementary building further down the road. So that's something to kind of think about. It's two options. With regards to the older structure, the 60s and 90s wing, we'd be knocking down the older parts of Morgan and utilizing it as green space. Because we know 20, 30, 40 years down the road, we will need to replace Lincoln, and then we would have a space in order to have Lincoln Elementary, which would be on this space. What can we do to promote a city? Yes, go ahead.
The last bond, there was a lot of money that was gonna go in, to rehab Lincoln, correct?
Yes.
Would that still be the intent for this bond?
Let me get to the next
Okay.
page.
Okay.
And we're